Thank you, sir. I'm very, very grateful to be here, invited to speak to so many people interested in my subject. I really thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to interact with such a distinguished audience. Tufail Sahab I have known for several years now, and I have been publishing his articles on my website, newageislam.com. Some of you may have read his articles on my website. Sometimes we even reproduce his articles published elsewhere. So you can see that I have great regard for him. And the most important thing about him is that he is a thinking person in a Muslim community where thinking is not really encouraged. In fact, it's not even allowed. In a madrasa, if you're a student, if you ask some question to your teacher, you are asked to go out and stand outside. You're thrown out of the room. If you ask some question. In a community where a few years ago in Western Uttar Pradesh, an alim, a Maulana, wrote an article on, don't laugh, this is a serious subject, on the size of the beard. Size of the Islamic beard. Now, beard has nothing to do with Islam altogether. But it is such a major issue, and you can even distinguish sects from the shape and the size of the beard. Some will have a smaller, some will have larger, some will have sharper like a triangle, and you can see, oh, this person would belong to this sect, if you know. Now, this fellow who wrote this article on what should be the actual religious Islamic size of the beard, he faced social boycott. He was excommunicated. Why? What was the charge? The charge was that you are an Ahlur Rai. What does that mean? A man of opinion. I mean, you know, the Holy Quran in every second page asks Muslims to reflect, to think, to ask. It says, why don't you ask? Why don't you question? Why don't you understand? In fact, the Quran and Islam said that the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, unlike previous prophets, will not show any miracle. You have to study, you have to observe nature, you have to observe yourself, you have to observe human beings, and accept or not accept. He will not, turn something into a snake or something, or tear apart the river or something like that. He would not do anything out of the ordinary, unnatural, supernatural to convince you. God said clearly that He will not do anything like that. You have to think and reflect, and then come to a conclusion, whether or not you like this religion. You accept it or you don't accept it. La ikraha fid din. There is no compulsion in religion. That is the Quranic verse. This is the universal Quranic verse. And we were told that there will be no miracles from the Prophet ﷺ at all. So that is the kind of religion. But we have reached a point where for being an Ahlur Rai, for being a man of opinion, you are thrown out of the community and face social boycott. We are a community in which, I used to run a kind of madrasa for helping, actually complementary to madrasa students, helping them learn English and maths and computer and things like that. And there I once asked a student to sing a song. We were doing some program on National Day. And the song he sings, the refrain of that song is, Zindagi shuru hoti hai qabr mein. It means life begins in the grave. Now, I'm glad to hear Sayyid Jilani Sahab, and he talked about deen or dunya, and especially Jilani Sahab said dunya comes first, dunya and then deen. But that is the kind of community we are. And if from this community somebody like Tufail Ahmad Sahab emerges, who questions everything, I do not agree with everything he says. But the very fact that he questions everything and he exposes the binary thinking among Muslims. You see, most of the Muslims, most of the time, think in binary terms, which is like Muslim kafir, Muslim mushrik, things like that. I mean, it's amazing that I once heard in a Sufi shrine a paean to Hazrat Ali Rizallahu Ta'ala anhu. What is that? It says, आज भी डरते हैं काफिर हैदरी तलवार से. Now, Hazrat Ali Rizallahu Ta'ala anhu, for those of you who do not know, he is the fountainhead of Islamic spiritualism. All spiritualism goes up to him. You know that, of course, he learned all this from Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who was himself a Sufi, who was himself a saint, who was himself what here we call Rishi or a Muni. He used to spend days on end, weeks on end, up to 40 days at a stretch in a cave on Mount Hira. He used to meditate all the time. This was before he became a prophet. And in fact, the reason he was chosen as a prophet, as a messenger of God, was his character. He was called Amin, that is trustworthy, by the Meccan people. You know, before he became a prophet, it was thought that here is one person who will never lie, who will never cheat, who will never do anything. The Meccan people had given him this adjective of Amin, Al-Amin. He was called Al-Amin, which means the trustworthy person. And that is the kind of character he had. And Hazrat Ali learned spiritualism from him. But when we are trying to praise him, now, Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he praised Hazrat Ali, he said he is Babul Ilm, which means gateway to knowledge. If you want to reach knowledge, the gateway is Ali. Right? But when we praise him today, even in Sufi shrines, we say, Aaj bhi darte hain kafir. Who are these kafir? Who are you fighting? What is happening? Nobody is even thinking. So in such an atmosphere, Tufail Sahab, asking questions, thinking, coming to conclusions, sometimes I do not agree with him. For instance, I would not blame Islam for many of the things that Muslims do. I would say Muslims and Islam are two different things. Then when you use the word Islam, it's not right to use it in a very generic concept, because there are so many Islams around. There are so many sects. There are scores of sects, at least 10 major sects, then subsects, then sub-subsects, and so on. There are so many views of Islam. So to blaming Islam for everything that Muslims do for me, is not the right thing. And then if you consider, for instance, if you consider Islam a religion of violence, then the very question of reformation goes away. Because how will you reform a community who believes in a religion which asks them, its followers, to commit violence? Then the whole question, then also, you see, if there are 1.6 billion people on this earth who believe in a religion which asks for violence, which asks them to kill others, then we should say goodbye to our planet, 1.6 billion people, 1/5 or 1/6 of humanity, if they all believe, then Islam has been there for 1400 years, and Muslims have done remarkable things. It's not only what some of them are doing today. There has been a golden period in Islam. Islam is given the credit by many Europeans for bringing Renaissance in Europe. Islam, inspired people. It brought education from all over the world, including from India, translated into Arabic, then worked on that. So Muslims have done a variety of things. 1400 years have passed. So we cannot judge Islam by the doings of today's jihadis. So there is this confusion among a lot of people that whether Islam is a religion of peace or violence. But one thing that we should understand, that if it is, see, we have 180 million Muslims in this country. And if they believe in violence, all of them, then you should say goodbye to your country. I mean, how can you survive? So we have to actually study and go deep into Islam and study the Prophet Muhammad's character, study what actually Islam says, etc. And I will give you just one, as an essence of Islam, I will give you just one quotation from the Holy Quran. In Islam, the highest virtue, the highest point that a Muslim can reach is to become a muttaqi, which means acquiring taqwa. Taqwa is righteousness. It is the highest that a Muslim can aspire for. the Holy Quran defines taqwa in one place, and I will read it out to you so that you can understand. The first thing, this is a very interesting definition of taqwa. The first thing that the Quran says is that taqwa is not facing the east or west, which means praying. So the first part of that definition is a negative, which is what taqwa is not. What taqwa is not is rituals. Following rituals is not taqwa. This is what Quran is saying. That now today you have Tablighi Jamaat and so many other Jamaats going to Muslims and telling them, you should dress in this way, you should root this, you should pray in this way, you should pray. All the focus is on rituals. But what the Quran is saying is that taqwa, I'll read it out to you if you allow me. This is Surah 2, verse number 177. It says, "It is not taqwa that ye turn your faces to the east and west." This is now. But then the Quran goes on to say what it is. But righteous or muttaqi or someone possessing taqwa is he who believeth in Allah and the last day and the angels and the scripture and the prophets. Prophets, this is in plural, which means we Muslims have to believe in all the previous prophets. You cannot be a Muslim. This is an essential part of Muslim faith, that you have to believe in all the previous prophets. In fact, God says in Quran that there is no nation where a prophet was not sent. There is no prophet who was not given a book. So all the nations in the world and all the communities in the world, for me as a Muslim, are Ahle Kitab. And I am allowed to have the closest and most intimate, including marital relationships with Ahle Kitab. And who are these Ahle Kitab? These are all the nations in the world, because the Quran is saying that there is no nation on earth where a prophet has not been sent, and no prophet who has not been given a book. Now, so we have to believe in the prophets. This is in plural. In fact, according to a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, there have been 124,000 prophets. So each and every corner of the world has been bestowed a prophet. Now, and giveth his wealth. So this is, who is a muttaqi? Somebody who giveth his wealth for love of him, which means love of the God, to kinsfolk, relatives, and to orphans, and the needy, and the wayfarer, which means the traveler, and to those who ask, and to set slaves free. In those days, there was this custom of slavery. So those who set slaves free are called muttaqi, who are the highest degree of Islam, and observeth proper prayer, and so on. It goes, I will not bore you with more details on this. So this is the essence of Islam. Now what has happened today, what is happening today, and what is confusing a lot of people is that a Muslim would go to a mosque, blow himself up, in order to kill other fellow Muslims, fellow Namazis, fellow people who are praying in the same mosque. And not only that, he has done this, killed himself and killed other people, thinking that he will go to heaven for having done that. Now this is a very, very serious issue for the Muslim community. You see, today now suicide is totally, completely prohibited in Islam. There can be no justification for suicide. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did not go to pray for the funeral of someone who was a ghazi, who had gone to a war with him, who had fought there and had got so many injuries, and he was so much in pain that he killed himself. He could not bear that pain, right? So here is a suicide which can even be justified, because in those days there were no hospitals, no anesthesia, no nothing. Now this man was in great pain, he killed himself. And he was a fighter, he was a Muslim, he had gone with the Prophet to fight, etc. There were so many justifying situations, but the Prophet refused to go to his funeral, because life is such a great gift. Life is the greatest gift that God has given us. And if someone takes life, and we have been told in the Quran that if you take one innocent life, it amounts to killing humanity. If you save one human life, it amounts to saving humanity. This is a Quranic verse. It's a very, very well-known Quranic verse. So in such a situation, but we are now in a situation where an army of suicide bombers can emerge from any Muslim society, anywhere in the world. An army. You see, convincing a human being to commit suicide is probably an impossible task. Because what can you give him and ask him to commit suicide? Because if he's dead, what will he benefit? There is no amount of money, there is nothing you can give him and ask him to commit suicide. No, you can ask people to go and kill, because then he will kill and then he will save himself, he will take your money or whatever. But suicide, and how can you convince anyone to commit suicide? But we are a society today from where an army of suicide people is emerging wherever you want in the world. Wherever there are vested interests, wherever there are people who are prepared to, to support you with the logistics of suicide and killing, there is an army available. So this is a moment of great concern for us, all us Muslims, and unfortunately the community doesn't seem to be concerned. So somebody like Tufail Sahab coming out and bringing these things out and exposing what is happening in the community is a great gift and is a great boon to us. And I heartily congratulate him for his work, and I support his work and I publish him, although I face a lot of criticism for publishing his work, because he seems to think that Islam has two sides, violence and peace, which is not true. Now, I cannot go into theological details, but I will just tell you one small thing here, is that there are verses in the Holy Quran which came at a time when Muslims had been forced to defend themselves, had run away from Makkah, and in their Medina, they were vulnerable. Now, these verses are contextual in nature. I would say that they do not apply to us anymore. But the problem is that our ulama will not say that. I say that these verses, these contextual verses, who came to guide the Prophet and the Muslims in that era, do not apply to us today in the 21st century. We are no longer fighting Jang-e Badr and Jang-e Uhud and things like that. And you will find Muslims celebrating these Jangs, and you will have anniversary of Jang-e Badr, you have scores of articles in Urdu press and things like that, all happening and all that. So we should not have this 7th century mindset where we are living in that world. An average Muslim, you will find, knows far more about an obscure companion of the Prophet than about the Prime Minister of the country or than about anyone else living in today's world. So we seem to be living in 7th century, which is not right. We seem to be living in the 21st century today. We are making use of all the values. Another thing that I should leave the thought with you is, so the ulama, it is the duty of the ulama to come out and explain these things. But the problem is that the theology that has developed over centuries, starting right from Hazrat Ali's time, when the Khawarij came and said that all these people, followers of Hazrat Ali as well as Hazrat Muawiyah, both of them are kafir and we should kill them all. So this kind of thinking started very soon after the Prophet. This sect of Khawarij started right then. And these extremists have always been a part of Islamic history. They have always been there. Sometimes they have been very powerful for brief periods, but most of the time mainstream Islam has been able to defeat them and bring Islam back to the mainstream of its spiritual and Sufi kind of nature and orientation. But today the situation has become very difficult because for the last 40 years, Saudi Arabia has been propagating an extremist form of religion, spending tens of billions of dollars, and it has radicalized, whole sections of communities. It has become difficult for me to even talk in a Muslim family and criticize Zakir Naik, because he is supported by Saudi Arabia. He has, he says things that appeals to people. He does a lot of drama on his television. He has plenty of money, as you are all aware, And it has become difficult for somebody like me to sit in a Muslim family where there are 4 or 5 people and criticize Zakir Naik. You can't do that. I mean, that is the kind of situation we have reached. And this has happened all over the world. From America to Indonesia or Malaysia or Singapore, wherever you go, you will find among Muslims a very deep, a kind of radicalization that has taken place. So today, while as I told you that extremists have always been there in the Islamist history, sometimes dominant, sometimes not so, and we have defeated them. But today the task is much more difficult. For the whole 40 years this has been going on unchecked. You have in Hyderabad, an alim like Abdul Alim Islahi Sahab, right? Now he is a radical jihadist ideologue who runs a women's, girls' madrasa, and he has the full freedom to write and publish and do whatever he like. Even after it was known, it came to be known to the government that he had inspired the Indian Mujahideen people. Even after that, he is come. So the community is not questioning him, what you are doing. He justifies what goes in the name of jihad today, right? Now, jihad is basically a spiritual struggle which we have to do jihad all the time, fighting against the evil within us. That is jihad. And that is something a Muslim has to do all the time, because these bad, evil thoughts arise in our mind, and we have to keep fighting it all the time. And that is why jihad has been given such a great value in Islam. But the meaning of jihad has been completely overturned, and the people who are doing that, even in India, even in Hyderabad, have no questions asked from the community. Like there is a professor called Dr. Najatullah Siddiqui. He used to belong to Jamaat Islami. I don't know if he is still with Jamaat Islami. He wrote an article saying that jihad is only for peaceful purposes, and jihad is not fighting and going out and killing people the way it is. Now, Maulana Abdul Alim Islahi wrote a counter to that, which is available on the internet in a booklet form, right? It is available. But I have not seen any Muslim alim questioning his premises. He is quoting Quran, he is quoting Hadith, he is quoting Sharia, he is quoting all sorts of things. He is quoting things from Islamic scripture. So if a non-Muslim comes across that, I mean, he doesn't have any idea of what Islam is. So he would naturally think that Islam is a religion of violence. So if there is confusion in the minds of a lot of people about Islam, I fully understand that. And the community should have been doing something to counter that, but is not doing. Part of the reason. Now, for instance, Khalifa Baghdadi said a year ago that Islam has never been a religion of peace, not even for a day. It has always been a religion of violence and war and conflict. Now, this was 1 year ago. A month ago, or maybe a little more, some Indians who have gone to Islamic State have made a video. They also said the same thing. But neither a year ago nor today I have heard from any of our alims in the country, from any sect, disputing that. I had thought, when the Khalifa Baghdadi said the first time, I thought there will be outrage in the community. And I read about 11 Urdu newspapers every day. So for 3-4 days, I kept looking, Not a single alim, not a single editorial, not a single article, no statement from anywhere, nothing happened. There was no outrage. But if a Danish cartoonist says something like that, we will rush to kill him. If a non-Muslim were to say something against Islam, we will rush to kill him. We will come out on the street and demonstrate. When Salman Rushdie wrote his book, Government of India was the first government in the world to ban it. The first time we heard about that book was that it has been banned in India. And still Muslims in Bombay demonstrated and apparently turned violent so that 7, 8 or 10, 15 people died. There was a clash or something happened. I don't remember now fully. I was in England at that time. So, but this happens. I was very surprised. I said, in a country like India, where from the day one the book is banned, why are you now going out on the street and demonstrating? What are you demanding? What do you want? So, but there is no one to ask these questions. There is no thinking that is going on in Islam. One more thought that I will leave you with is that the Islamic theology that has developed over the years, which is part of, which has become part, which is taught in madrasas everywhere, is not unreformable. It is not being reformed. No attempt is being made to reform it. No attempt is being made to create a theology of peace and pluralism. The theology of consensus today, this is a very big tragedy. The theology of consensus in Islam today is a theology of violence and supremacism and exclusivism, and that we have to dominate the world, that Islam means dominating the world. Islam is a political ideology. Islam is turned into a totalitarian ideology, a kind of fascist ideology, which has to dominate the world, etc. But a counter narrative, a counter theology of peace and pluralism and inclusivism that we mainstream Muslims claim to believe in is really not available. There are works by Sufi saints and things like that, and the things are there, but the work has to be done, and we have to relook at even the interpretations of Quran and things like that. For instance, my foundation studied the word kafir in Quran. In what sense it is used? And we found that the word kafir is not meant to denote all non-Muslims, all non-believers. It is used in two different senses. In some places, 8, 10 places, I think it is used with al-kafir. Now, al means the, as in English, the. The means what? The means a specific person. The kafir means that particular kafir, that group of, or al-kafirun, which means that group of. Now, who were these groups? These were groups from Makkah who had believed in persecution of Muslims, who would not allow Muslims to function as Muslims, to continue, who did not believe in religious freedom. So it is these people who are referred to in all those verses. I mean, we gave this, in every verse in Quran, we found that this is how it is used. And in a spiritual sense, when it is used with min, mim, amen, that is how it is not al. Al means the, that, so elsewhere there is no violence everywhere. So it is but this is a very simple thing, and you will not find anybody in madrasas being taught this. So there are similar things. There are many, many things. I cannot go into details here. I mean, Tufail Sahab also has to speak. So I should, leave him some time also. But what I am saying is that the case is not lost, that the theology is reformable, that it is possible to work out a theology of peace and pluralism and inclusivism that we require today. Unfortunately, no such work is happening. People like me are doing whatever little, we can on individual levels, etc. But the community doesn't seem to be bothered, and I try to use any opportunity I get while writing or speaking to ask the community to take this matter seriously. It is a very, very difficult and serious situation, and we should take it more seriously. So now I will leave you with these thoughts, and thank you. Thank you very much.